Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people around the world. This is Martin Hubel, the host of the DB2 Night Show, and I'd like to welcome you to show number Z100. Wow, we've done 100 shows on DB2 on Z OS, and we're really pleased to have Patrick Bossman back with us as our special guest. How are you doing today, Patrick?
Great.
Ready to go. You went quiet there. I didn't hear you too much.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's me. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I turned down my sound too much. That was
we gave a plug to Verizon there.
No, it was mine. It was mine. It's amazing how I can make any number of mistakes running this show. And the thing is not to make the same mistake, because there's brand new ones out there that are just as good as the last ones I made. So let's move along and get the housekeeping out of the way so we can turn this over so we can get on with your presentation and demo. Once again, here's our social media. As always, on Twitter, you can follow us with the hashtag of DB2Night, and a new LinkedIn group, of course, which is not so new anymore. I'll take the new off there eventually. But if you want to give us any feedback, that's the best place to do it. Here's our famous disclaimer. Things are being recorded. Copyrights are being respected, especially those of IBM. And if you say anything, it will be recorded and it becomes property of DBI. Thank you very much. So there's our agenda for today, our quick announcements, our studio audience polls, and then we'll have the Patrick's presentation on Show and Tell, Agile Development Practices with DB2 for ZOS. Upcoming shows for the DB2 Night Show LUW edition, the next presenter will be Ember Crooks, and it says Extivia. I'm sorry, I meant to change that. She has changed companies. Ember Crooks is now with Sherwin-Williams. She's joined the people that make paint. The topic is still the same, health checks, how to evaluate the health of a DB2 database. That'll be a great presentation. And on December 13th, we've got George Backlars of the IBM Toronto Lab back with us on DB2 and Jupyter Notebooks, up and running in no time. So that if you're looking to get started with Jupyter, that'd be one thing that you want to see. Next month, we have Adrian Burke back with us from the IBM DB2 SWAT team, which is Distributed Best Practices for DB2 Today and Tomorrow. That'll be a great show. And to finish off the year, we have Tony Andrews of Themis. He's a great presenter. He'll be talking about his best developer features from DB2Z on V9 to V12. So be sure to either tune in for that or listen to the replay afterwards. As always, the DB2 Performance Webinar for DB2 LUW is available. You can watch that yourself. As you fill in your contact information, they'll send you a nice gift card. So that's a good, worthwhile thing to do, and you'll get a small amount of compensation for your time. Also, pointing out last week's winner of, I believe, an Amazon gift certificate is Andres Gomez of Experience, and we've sent that off. And our sponsors are, as always, DBI is the founding sponsor of the DB2 Night Show, and yours truly, Martin Hubel Consulting, Inc., is also a sponsor of the DB2 Night Show. All right, I've got a fun thing this week. I was cleaning out my basement, and after working with DB2 for only 34 years, I've managed to collect some interesting things. I actually did find a copy of Platinum Technologies DB2 version 4 catalog poster. Hoo-hoo, I wanted to keep that one around, but in reality, I must admit of putting it in my recycle bin. But I came across this other poster from a company I used to work for, and this doesn't even have the name of the company on it, so I made sure I wanted to note it where it came from. They were calling this poster the Database of Horrors, and you can see that it's from a very long time ago, like 30 years ago. There's many giveaways here. We've got little gremlins doing all sorts of things to this poor guy. He's sitting on a CRT, and there's all sorts of magnetic tape. And if you look at the paper, the computer paper all over the place, it's got perforated holes down the side. Oh my goodness. But the people at System Center, formerly known as VM Software, had a very creative art department, and they put out these posters, and it was fun to come across that in my basement, so I thought I'd just share it with you.
89. Uh-oh.
And I tell you.
I graduated from high school.
Well, yeah, it's starting to show my age when I'm starting. But at this point, I'd already been working with DB2 for 4 years, and those are back in the days. I started teaching classes in September of 1987, so what does that tell you? 2 years experience, and all of a sudden you have enough knowledge to teach other people something in DB2. Those were the pioneering days of DB2, where it didn't take much to be an expert. And after 4 years of doing a lot of teaching, I do a fair bit for the time. Bit of fun, though. And some of the other posters they put out were, let me call them politically incorrect, but they had a lot of fun doing it, and we had a lot of fun seeing them and talking with people about it. It was really quite something. So we've got a few questions for our studio audience, as always. Things are what's your newest version of DB2Z that you're running? And here we are. We've got just a few people voting. We got even more people voting. That's a good thing. You
didn't want to put version 10, 9, 8 on there, just in case?
Well, I'm only allowed 5 answers. Okay. So you find that if you give me 6 answers, I've got to lump them together. But what we see, though, is we've got an awful lot of people on 503 or higher. That's really good to see. Our audience really is up around 70% on well, actually more like over 80% of our audience is version 12 today. That's great. And new function mode is on version 11 is 14% of our people, and that's all right. So let's move along and do the next one. We've got a whole bunch of these today. Some are, this one is besides. Does this actually allow more than one? If it doesn't, I've buggered up the poll. And I'm going to go in and...
If it allows one, pick the best.
No, I'm going to go in and see if I can fix that right now. Because that's silly.
Well, you put it in there. Work with weekly. Yeah.
Yeah. Edit poll. And multiple answers. Update. I don't know. Let me close this and reopen it and see what happens. I probably can't fix that one, but let me fix the next one, which is Martin is always good at fixing things. Sometimes even before they need to be fixed. There we are. So I don't know if I can. That one basically says DB2. It doesn't really say the others. People that wanted to know about that. Nice. Idiot.
Exactly what we were looking for right there.
Yeah, exactly. Let me try this again. This is now corrected.
Yeah,
so let's see how it works. We want that DB2. Yes, of course you're on a DB2 show. Hello. But just to see what other things people might be using. This will allow multiple people. At this point, I get no other answers other than DB2 for Z or LUW. And that's fine too. We've given enough time on the corrected question. It's still 100% DB2. And here's another one.
Right.
We are running into people that run open source stuff, and we're interested to see which ones they're using. And it's interesting. Getting a bunch in here, but we still don't have, we've got a small amount of the audience voting. We just need a few more people, and we'll close that poll off and share the results. Have you ever heard of Redis? I had never heard of this until.
Yep.
Well, we'll close that off. That's enough time on that. We'll share the results.
When you get into DevOps, you run into everything.
I'm sure you do.
I might bring up the cloud native landscape poster that shows 1,000 products. Oh, that's a pretty good distribution there.
Yeah, indeed. Well, there's our sample set on open source databases. We'll hide that and move on. Now these questions are ones that Patrick was asking people to fill out. So if you could give us a quick vote on your years of experience. And I updated this a little bit to see
Sure.
See if there's people as gray as I am. And you got most of the audience voting there. We'll close that off and share the results so we can get through on and get on to the next questions. Notice we've got one person with a little bit of experience. The rest of people are very experienced. What is your role? Watching that. I had to loop.
This one could affect the whole delivery of the presentation right here.
That sounds really great. Alrighty, there we go. And, got everybody voted. We'll share the results there. You've got application architect and DBAs. We'll move on and do the next one. This is another key question as well. Where are you in the adoption of continuous delivery, continuous integration? This is really interesting to see. We're getting votes all the way across.
The other interesting aspect of this question is that it kind of, even in the same company, it would depend on who you ask.
Oh, yes, yes. The funniest thing I ever came across that way was I was on an airline flying off to the Middle East, and there was it was interesting reading the words of a manager in the airline magazine about the airline and how well they were doing with compliance with Y2K back in the day. And the executive was saying, "Oh, we're all done. We're the first airline in the world, or one of the first airlines in the world to complete." And then I went into their offices and met with the manager. He goes, "They just say stuff like that. We're done. We're working our tails off." So, have you heard of Zoe before? And the answer here is 75%.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. And then our next one is, we'll hide that. The last one is launch. Improving developer agility is important to our organization.
This is maybe a loaded question. I would see if why are you here?
Yeah, that's. I think we'll call that one done. But everybody, yeah, we like to have our developers actually do something. A good idea. Alrighty, well, that's the end of those questions. So now we'll move along here, and I'll make you the presenter, and we'll get this road on the show, as we like to say.
Sweet.
Now you should have a little pop-up.
And you're seeing the right screen, I believe, right?
Seeing the right screen. You're ready to go. The attendees of our show know about the question tool. You can type in your questions. I'll be monitoring the question queue, and I'll break in occasionally with the questions, and I'll phrase them for you. And
Okay.
also, at some point, I've got a one-page slide that I'd like to show on behalf of DBI. Just they like to make sure people know about their products, and I'll break in with that slide at a convenient point. Let's say about halfway through your presentation.
All right.
All right.
So my name is Patrick Bossman, Senior Technical Staff Member with DB2 for ZOS. And I had 17 years, well, I still do a little bit of query optimization, but my background is 17 years experience in query optimization, query performance, and last I'm losing count of the years. I took over DevOps and cloud provisioning, and now I've taken a new position, lead architect for new applications. And so my new role, it's kind of an extension of my old role. It encompasses what do we have to do so that when you're sitting here looking where are we going to put this application, what platform are we going to put it on, that your answer is DB2 for ZOS. And so I want to credit Catherine Suhu. We delivered this session together at Data Tech Summit. She did all of the work around the demos, along with assistance from Kendrick Wren and Tran Lam. Love the support that I get from my team. Catherine and Tran are very new, and I think one of the things I like to tell people is you should hire new young people, add them to the team when you have experienced people, because it brings an energy and a degree of innovation that you won't get otherwise, right? I just sometimes when Catherine's creating the videos, I said, don't polish it, just do it, right? Just show me what you're doing so I can review and make sure the flow is right. And I can see how she does her work. And so I learned things about how to use, newer technology, things that I didn't see before just by watching how she works. So you never know what you're going to learn from when you inject youth into your organization. Highly recommend it. All right. So what are we going to talk about here? A little bit of an overview. Application deployment challenges. What are they on with the mainframe? What is a delivery pipeline? Why is there an emphasis on Agile and DevOps? And a lot of it is about figuring out whether you're doing the right thing, right? And trying to get that answer as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. The old style of taking 18 months, 2 years, 3 years to put a big batch together and do a release takes you a really long time to figure out whether that was a good investment or not. And you may have, maybe 50% of it was wise or not. So how do you keep your user base engaged, and how do you continue to deliver features that they need? Smaller, faster, try and get the feedback loops as quick as possible. I have a slide. There's very few slides on this deck. It's going to be very demo heavy. If there was a chart showing how many slides I include trending over time, it would go from very high, and it's trending towards 0. Maybe someday they'll let me get to 0. I don't know. Not quite there, but so we're going to have a demo party at the end. But the developer cycle is, maybe I'll get down to 1 slide. That's my favorite slide. It just kind of encapsulates, what are we trying to do with self-services, with efficiency? And I'm a developer. I was a customer before. So one of the things that's been great for my career is I always put myself sitting down as I was a C developer, then I was a database engineer, database designer, database administrator. Then I did query performance tuning, which is how I did a lot of work in IBM. So I try to put myself in your seat, in both the developer seat and the DBA seat, and say, okay, what does the DBA need to have happen here? What does the developer need to have happen here? How do we bring these two together and make sure they're both meeting their requirements, right? And so for the developer, I like to keep them in the zone, right? All right. So on why is it difficult to develop and deploy on mainframe, and a lot of this is legacy. It's process and how things were done historically, and a lot of it didn't just apply to mainframe. It applied to originally to distributed platforms as well. But the incremental changes are not pushed independently. We tend to batch things up on the mainframe and do larger releases. There's a lot less developer agility. So companies would, and by that I mean with the database objects and some of this is cultural and some of it persists today, where certain developers may not even be able to get access to a mainframe to try things out. So what can happen sometimes is if the development teams nowadays can't get access and poke around and figure out what they need to get something done, then they'll pull the data off and they'll do it somewhere else, right? And so one of the key tenets that we try to do is say, let's find a way to give the developers access, even if it's just a prototype, right? And to try things out and see what's available on the mainframe, and make it self-service. One of the big challenges is anytime, everybody has tight deadlines now. DBAs have deadlines, developers have deadlines, and anytime that you're dependent on something from an outside organization that you don't control, and I'm not just saying, this is not friction, it's reality. And I think even DBAs know that. My queue is huge. I don't have time to do this. We got to find a way to let these guys do these things themselves, right? And that's really one of the goals we try to accomplish is eliminate points where somebody has to wait on somebody else. Okay, application deployments are not owned by the dev team. Application database schema changes are manual. And so anything that's manual and costs a lot to do, you'll do less frequently, right? So to the extent that we can make something cheaper to do it, you'll enable it to be done more often. Need unique skills to do deployments. I need to alter a table and add a column. How do I do that? Certain types of schema changes that have to be done. Is it an immediate alter, a pending alter, with a reorg that materializes it, or do you need to unload, drop, create, load? And if you hit the unload, drop, create, load, are you going to be able to do that, or is this your billion row table? No chance, right? We need to actually design a different way to do it. So there's unique skills, especially with databases, on how to do deployments. But sometimes, if you design things a particular way, you can make some changes and be agile with some of the more frequent changes that have to be made. Mainframe teams are isolated and work at different development pace than distributed teams. These things, we're trying to break these barriers down, right? That's one of our goals, is to bring, to allow the pace to pick up on the mainframe. All right, so delivery pipeline, fast feedback loop. I shamelessly stole this. I think this is Jez Humble's slide, where you see you do a check-in into version control, and even when you're typing into the editor, it's giving you feedback. Are you violating? Do you have a syntax error, right? But you get to commit. You run some tests. You get some feedback. You check in. Your commit is successful. You have automated acceptance tests that execute. If they fail, feedback back to the developer, and they call it delivery team, right? Everybody associated with making that code change. And so this actually came up in a DevOps forum. Hey, what does shift left mean? And if you look at this is from inception, right? The inception of an idea to the release of that idea. There are all these checkpoints, and we go to the right and down. But shift left is you want to find out that you're wrong. You want this cycle to be as short as possible, because you want, if what you're doing is wrong, you want to stop doing it. If it's broken, you want to fix it. And if you find things out in release, you're really far from that developer having written that line of code. And if they're definitely not in the zone, they might not be on the project anymore. right? So to the extent that problems are found while that developer is engaged and working on that code, the cost to fix it is just astronomically lower, right? So shift left is real, getting feedback as quickly as possible, both that your code is functional and that your idea is valuable. You know, who wants to work on something that's a failure, right? You want to find out on both of those things as quickly as possible, right? All right, so this is what I call the developer cycle. And so I'm kind of pathological on efficiency because I worked in query performance, and it's just, there's something wrong with me for sure. I hate traffic. I don't like waiting in line for things. So it's a thing for me, and it's deeply ingrained. So for the developer, and even any role that you have, when you have to wait for somebody else and you're stuck, it's frustrating, right? So, and anytime, and I know this for myself, when you have an idea, you're working hard at something, and then you get stuck, you might lose your thought, right? The little light bulb can be extinguished. And so to me, keeping these developers and DBA or whoever the person is, and with the database change, we like to say now that database change is a DBA in a developer role making a code change to the database, right? It could be store procedure, trigger, UDF, altering the table. You're actually doing a development activity. And when you create that index, you're deploying your change somewhere, right? So even when you're thinking about something, you know, you don't want to be interrupted. You don't want to have to wait for something. You want to lose your train of thought, right? So where we're going to go today is we're going to show one of the demos is going to be all the self-services that and integration we did with it. This is an open tool chain, right? We're using, I'll show you on the video, we're using Visual Studio Code, Jenkins, we're using GetLab, which you'll see GetLab. Jenkins is in here, but it's totally hidden. You don't even see it. For deployment tool, we're going to use UrbanCode deploy. For the database change management, we're using DB2 DevOps Experience. And we use DB2 DevOps Experience is built on top of Zoe. So you're going to see the Zoe user UI in here. But it's really showing how do we do self-services and integration with the modern tool chain to give a developer a modern experience and help them move fast, and what types of things do we bake into the process that we create quality as well, right? All right, so git clone, you copy the code down, we deploy the application, you customize the environment, person's gonna make a change, you make the change, this is a deployment to your environment, test and evaluate. If you break your environment, what do you have to do today? Does the developer go, oh, can you reload the data for me? I trashed my environment. Can you refresh the environment? Do they have to wait to do iterations of test? If they have to wait anywhere in here, that's bad. That's going to slow down their development and testing, and there's going to be one or two things that happens. If they really do slow down, you're going to get less testing out of that person, because to the degree that they have a deadline and this loop is inefficient, it'll reduce the testing that they're going to do, or it'll elongate the delivery time. So I think there's a direct impact on quality here. And the other side is really they got to wait for somebody to refresh an environment when there's no real, value to doing that. That's definitely something that should be a self-service. So one of the things we try to do is inject anything we could do to keep the developer working really efficiently in here is incredible. It's going to help your company. All right, when they're done, then we're going to have a playback, show and I call it show and tell. You review, co-review, everything get accepted, then you merge, right? But it's really helping a developer do all of these things as quickly as possible is one of the key first steps that we're trying to accomplish. All right, so let me jump down. And so first, we're going to do the application change. Any questions before? I want to give you a chance to interject before I start the demo. Anybody have anything they want to ask Martin? Do you know?
I don't have any questions showing.
All right.
Great job.
Move this one over. Here's my 3270 screen. You're never supposed to see that. I try not to show that, but there is actually green. There's some green for you. Anybody want to see green screen today? All right. Make this super big. Do you see the screen okay? Do you see developer code change workflow?
Yes, I do.
All right. So the way this flow is going to work, we're going to start, we use GetLab, and GetLab has, I know we got a lot of DBAs in here, maybe the architect maybe knows what this is. GetLab is an installation of Git. You can run it on your own server. That's why we like it. It's open source. Actually, we should back up, and the developer is going to use Visual Studio Code as their IDE. So they're going to take the issue, and they're going to assign it to themselves. And then we're going to have them deploy the app. And this is going to set up, we're going hyper automation. So actually, it's not completely done in this demo, but the next generation of the demo, we go so far as to create the feature branch for the user. We create the environment in UrbanCode deploy. We create the pipeline in Jenkins, and we link them all up. So we've linked them all up, but we didn't do all of the deployment pieces in this particular demo to create the connection to Jenkins. And so what that means is the developer clones the code to their workspace, and as soon as they make a change, as soon as they push it to the server, we deploy that change to their development environment, run a series of tests, right? So we deploy to the development environment. Jenkins is monitoring that feature branch on the server, calls UrbanCode because we do DB2 things. We have to do a build for, in this case, it's a Java store procedure program, and we have to deploy that to the development environment, right? And then when they're done making this change, actually we do 2 rounds of changes here. And then when they're done, they issue a pull request. And for the DBAs, maybe the application architect knows what that means, but in Git terminology, a pull request is ask the feature branch, the master branch owner, will you please pull my code to that environment, right? So pull request is always kind of weird because it feels like you're pushing your code, but you're really asking somebody else to pull it, and that's what pull request means. So if you learn one thing today, maybe that's it. So after the pull request, we'll deploy it to the continuous integration server, execute screen tests using Jenkins and UCD, review and approval, and after that, we upgrade the provisioning source, which is when we created an environment for the developer, we created it from something, and it's this source that we created it from. And then 2 other things happen. One, you're on the pipeline to production, right? That code change is in, the developer can close their ticket and they're done. It may be an issue or defect that's open, they get a problem opened as a result of their code change. Hopefully not. Hopefully their test caught any problems, and they worked them off before that. But otherwise, it's on the pipeline to production. The other thing that happens is if there were other developers that had provisioned an environment working on other changes, well, you've now integrated a change above them. So we do a compare of the gold master to their environment and say, hey, there's been a change. You want to accept this change and upgrade your environment, and you can choose to self-service upgrade or take it later. All right, so there's a lot of automation. So this is GetLab, right? It's source control, and we have a folder with some tests in it, and this is a SQLJ store procedure, JSON file. All right. Navigate a little bit around GetLab if you've never seen this before, but it's just where your source code is, right? So there's an issue board within GetLab. There's Jira, lots of different ticketing systems, ZenHub. So these are just issues, right? Somebody opened a problem and we're looking at them as an issue. We're going to go to the board here in a second. Couple problems. All right. So what's wrong? Current result, we're getting 2 rows back. We're supposed to get 3. This is the defect, right? And then we've also tacked on for this. This is an application. The application's Java Store Procedure Demo. And so we've tacked on the create sandbox environment, delete sandbox environment, self-services for the DBA, and they're associated with this application. All right. So Catherine, as I mentioned earlier, created the demo, assigning the issue to herself. She's all right. So now this is a board. If you haven't seen that before, a Kanban board. Basically, when she moved it from one place to another, she took ownership of that issue. Now she's a developer, says, okay, I need an application environment, right? And so this will create an application environment. Now we're using UrbanCode to do this, and behind the scenes to create the database objects, it's using a REST API to call the DevOps Experience. But you might have other things that have to be laid down. If you had to lay down some vSAM files or do other middleware pieces, UrbanCode deploy is an orchestrator. It's multi-platform. You could deploy to the Google Play Store, an iPhone app, to your corporate portal. You can deploy to x86. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of plugins that extend UrbanCode. Probably the easiest way to describe it is if we were an orchestra, the UrbanCode is the conductor. It doesn't know how to do all the different things that have to be done, but it knows how to orchestrate and say, okay, strings, okay, now, the violins, whoever is supposed to play to make beautiful symphony, UrbanCode is that conductor. And the different platforms like DB2, we created plugins, and other database products also create plugins to extend this platform so that we can do an application deployment with one click, right? So I like to say that, I feel a little silly saying this, UrbanCode's kind of dumb. It doesn't really know what to do, but it's also very smart. And that the process to execute all these tasks, that's what its role is. There are other ones. We use UrbanCode, it's an IBM product. Other people use, I think people use Bamboo to do some orchestration, Ansible. For infrastructure, you might see Chef and Puppet. There are other deployment tools, and we're not dependent on any one of them. We execute a bunch of scripts and we do REST APIs. So if you wanted to use, the first thing I ask customers is, how are you deploying software for distributed today? How would you do, web server deployments or something? What is the tool that they're using? Because usually you want to centralize down to one tool chain because you have people that understand it, and you want to integrate these types of services into a single CI/CD tool chain. All right. Blah, blah, blah. Keep going, Pat. Hit play. All right, so you click that button, and then you get spammed, right? And that's true. You do get spammed. But it's interesting stuff. Okay. The environment's created. We have our schema name, collection ID, environment name, right? So you got a handy place to know what information you'll need. And this is quick. You don't have to look at this. You got the information you needed, but I wanted to show you that the environment was actually created. This is a web UI, and we'll get into that a little later. But it shows the environment was actually created in DB2. All right. So the application environment is created. That was probably really fast. What Catherine does here is she's copying this URL, and this is the repo, and she's gonna clone the repo using Git to her workstation. And this is, developer 101 here. And the code, Java Store Procedure Demo, she's using Visual Studio Code. One of the things I like about Visual Studio Code is you can you can make it web enabled and host it in the cloud. All right, so she again looked at the problem and said, okay, how do I fix this thing? First, let's fix, now this is kind of a DevOps thing right here. And we shamelessly stole this from how I saw NPM node packages being created, that they always include tests with the code to make sure that after you install the project, that you execute these tests and it'll basically verify that that code is working properly. And so thank you, Node, for showing that. And we include our code, our tests with the code. First thing she has to do is fix the test case, right? The test case had 2 rows. Now the test case has 3 rows. Now we're going to go into the SQL J, the Java code. And so there's a problem with this cursor. Now the correct filter is department number, but we're going to make it mistaken just to show what happens, right? So she's made a change. She's doing a git add, which says whatever I've changed, and you can kind of see on the left here, modified. So these 2 files are changed. When she does git add dot, it's adding both of these files. And when she commits them, she's committing the changes for both of these files into Git. And the git push is when she cloned this, this is registered with the GetLab server that you saw via a web UI earlier. So she's pushed it to that server, right? And Jenkins is monitoring that server. It picks up, okay, we have a code change, and to deploy that, we have to do a bunch of things. Prepare the Java code, bind packages on DB2, alter the store procedure, refresh WLM, and then the last step is validate with command line processor. So it's executing those tests, right, that she also changed. So this is the command line processor output, and we're expecting to see 3 rows here, and we're only getting 1 row back. So whoops, I used the wrong filter. Let's go back to the editor and fix it. All right. Did you see that? She corrected the where clause to use the correct filter. Now we're going to do git add commit push. So when System Z did this demo, they introduced a bug, they had this huge gap of white space, and then they set their account balance to 0, and it was like, you know, like we were going to return that you had no money in your account, and it was just insanely obvious where the bug was. So maybe I'll take a cue from them and do something. It was pretty funny. All right, same git commands, right? But this time the only one that changed was the SQL J file. All right, so the deployment completed successfully. And that means that we did all of the build preparation, refreshed WLM, et cetera, deployed, bound the packages, and executed the command line processor tests successfully. And so one of the things that and I really have to go back to a guy named Carmen Diardo. He, you know, because he would say, people say that change is not ready. That developer just made that change. I'm not going to commit that change. You know, I'm not going to allow that to be deployed. And so he would turn around and say, okay, what has to happen? What do you need? What's done, right? What's done for this? What's done for this change? What do you need to see that this change is complete? And I really took that to heart. And it's not just for Java store procedures, it's for database changes, for anything. You know, how do you know it's done? How do we create the circumstances to automate to know that it's done? Or if there's manual steps involved, how do we either reduce the skill that's required, reduce the time that a high-skilled person is required, bring, you know, really try to make the process as efficient as possible. And when we say CI/CD, CI means continuous integration. CD, there's a debate, is it continuous deployment, continuous delivery? But another phrase of CI that I love is continuous improvement. and it's really how you approach your work. How do we make this faster while retaining quality and baking quality into the automation? Because when you can really improve automation, and it catches things, you're getting a consistent quality, right? All right, so we moved forward a little bit. The changes, Catherine was happy with her changes, and now she's issuing a pull request. And so the administrator gets, and it was just a bunch of additional Git commands to update the master. And so whoever is the owner, you know, or this is a source control. You say who has authority to merge this change into this CM controlled area. So they're going to get a notification, and they'll do a review of this, right? All right, so they get a compare of what the code change looks like, original, new, and we added a row to the test file, right? Test case has been updated, good to see that. Approve the merge. All right. So the merge triggers the update of the team environment, and that's the gold master. So we get a bunch of deployment messages that say the environments have been upgraded successfully, right? These are automated deployments. The other thing that happens is, okay, first of all, we can have the ticket automatically closed, or you can just drag it over and say, we're done with this item, right? Now, back up a second. The other thing that Catherine's doing is she's saying, I'm done, right? The ticket's closed. She comes back to the ticket, says delete sandbox environment. And we've had debates about, do we auto delete the environment? Do we leave it around because it might work on another ticket on this application? And to be honest with you, we show one embodiment of what's possible, but this is really under your control. And a DevOps engineer is just going to ask some questions and say, well, what do you want to happen, right? The key is there are APIs and services available to support this automation. And where you have review and approvals, or where you have full automation, whether you fully automate the create when they open the ticket and the delete when they close it, or if you make them do a self-service create or delete, is really up to you and what works for your system. It's not prescribed, right? Now we're deleting the environment. And this is that delete is deleting the UrbanCode, the registration in UrbanCode, the registration in GetLab, and the database environment is also destroyed. If you had vSAM files that were laid down, we would delete those vSAM files as well, right? So you're orchestrating the cleanup of the environment that was created there. All right, so we merged. Now you see dev, really fine print dev 002. Somebody else had a copy of that application and they were working on another issue, right? And so what we do is we do a compare and say, hey Joe, Catherine merged a change above you. And so take a look at this. And Catherine's change is approved. It's entirely plausible that if this really was Joe versus Dev 002, that they know about this change. They may have participated in the code review. They may have approved it, right? But we have automation to say, you provisioned an environment. You are now down level. So take a look at what this person did, and you can accept or wait on applying that change to your environment. So they can see what, does this impact me? Am I working on this module myself? Am I working on this test case? If not, then they can just accept the change. If they are, then they have to assess what they need to do, right? Maybe they need to pull it down and apply their change on top of it. All right, so with a key to this demo, a lot of automation in here. The developer can easily get started working on a problem. We get the application environment set up for them. If they destroyed their environment, they could delete it and re-provision it. If after we merge the change into the CM-controlled integration environment, we tell other developers, hey, this change happened, assess your impact. It doesn't require waiting for an administrator to initiate these pieces. When the administrator needs to be involved, we bring the information they need to the review and approval, and we can adjust. You know, when we do database schema changes in that flow, one of the things that we do is we capture not only a diff of what the schema change is, but what is the deployment process for a schema change, and we present that to the administrator, and they can say, oh, that's highly invasive, and it could be a DBA making the change. You know, all right. So let me drop out of this one. But the key was the self-services to let that developer, you know, build the environment that they need, change the environment that they need, have the automated tests. They can work really fast. And if we need more test cases automated, you know, things like that, then we just add them in there, right? Build a framework that helps them move with agility. All right, so now, Martin, this is a breaking point. I'm gonna switch between the first demo and the second demo. Did you wanna throw your slide in? Are you ready?
Oh, sure, I'm ready. Thanks so much. Let me just grab that and make myself a presenter for just a minute here. And, this won't take too long. I'll just hit AC. The right thing here. What does this button do? There we go. Now I'll just advance one slide. There we are. This is basically, I just wanted to show the main screen that you see in the DBI tool set. I know that people here are mainly DB2 on Z, but at some point it seems that things stay on Z for as long as they can, and sometimes we move to DB2 LUW. And when you get serious with DB2 LUW, you might be interested in having a decent performance workbench to help you find bad queries and report service levels to management. This particular screen shows overall what's happening with your databases, the min and max and average scores of various databases. There's an internal measurement that DBI does to tell you whether a database is getting a good grade or a failing grade in terms of performance. It tells you where your best and worst performing transactions are, read and write times and CPU time, as well as the one down here. Also another calculation they do on index read efficiency, which is basically how good are the indexes you have and how are they being used for given transactions and operations against various tables. And that's another way of knowing when you need to look at SQL and improve indexes. And with that, I'll stop the commercial there and turn it back to you, Patrick.
All right. Got to give me the...
Yep, there we go.
All right. So I'm going to be brave. This is a live demo at this point. Dun, dun, dun. So this is Zoe. Let me log out real quick. There you go, login screen, right? Zoe, open, simple, familiar. And DevOps Experience is built on top of Zoe. The original DevOps Experience shipped before the original Zoe, so we bundle part of it that uses the 1.0 version, the web, mostly the web usability, the web desktop capabilities. It'll be prereqing the Zoe 1.5 in the near future, and then what that'll do is you can run more than one Zoe on your machine, but there's a lot of cool stuff in there. In addition to DevOps Experience, there's if you haven't heard of Zoe, so part of it is this web desktop, which you could consider in the future, instead of ISPF, we should provide a more modern user experience on top of this web desktop. And there's a command line interface that was contributed by CA. Zoe command line interface it runs on your client, and people have used that to bring extensions to Visual Studio Code. There's a release from IBM to do COBOL syntax highlighting, code completion, and PL1 syntax highlighting, code completion. So there's a lot of cool stuff. On the web browser, they've also got, and I don't have them installed on here, but there's a Unix System Services Explorer, an MVS Dataset Explorer, so you can navigate your data sets, edit your data sets right from the web browser, no install. And an STSF Explorer. So if you have Java programmers that don't want to use TSO, you can have a no install access to that type of activity to your developers. So Zoe is the next generation user experience is great, and I love that I don't have to install anything. You know what I mean? I'm lazy. So first, let me. And if you don't use something frequently, why should it clutter up your desktop? Then you look at the bottom here, and I have Atom, IBM Explorer, Android Studio, Xcode. Here's Visual Studio. I try everything. You know, I'm a glutton for punishment. Setting up a service. How did we set up so that when that developer clicked that provision database that we create, what did that create behind the scenes? What were the objects that got created under the covers? How do we define that service? So first say, okay, I have another subsystem. If I want to allow developers, if I have applications that I want to discover, database objects that I want to turn into an application that I make available to developers to create and destroy, then I could register this subsystem. If I want to allow this to be a target, so when they click on the button to create new instances that I create objects, then I would also register subsystem here, right? I'm not going to fire that off. It'll take a little while, and I want to do some other things, right? So I don't want to put myself in jeopardy. All right. So when you register, you gotta, you give it, and it's really an administrator that does this. It's not, your developer is not doing this. This is the person who's gonna say, I wanna set the service up. You then have, let's look, these are teams and environments. So we say, okay, here's my development team, and who administers that? So what does it mean for administrator? If we make a change to the objects that we define in this database, who would review and approve those changes, right? And so that's the team administrator. They're going to get notified. What environments will we allow people to create and destroy in? So I'm just giving the development environment, dev environment. They can create instances up to 50 for the whole team, 5 for a user. So part of the concern we get from customers is, I don't want to let them create things. It's going to get out of control, right? They're going to create too many environments. Well, you can set some limits on what they can do, and we can assign what subsystems objects get created in, right? We give a naming convention to control the schema prefix that's used. There is the suffix. There has to be somewhere where we can differentiate the environments, an instance identifier, and I gave a database prefix as well. Behind the scenes, the users, the definition of the team, who the users are, we can change it here. These are, I'm a naming convention crazy person. So U is user, D is developer, TP is TPCD developer, and the D is, their role is developer. So the first D is for, this is a development organization, and this is a developer in the development organization, right? And I'm sorry, DBAs, I gave the developers the D, you got the B, okay? Maybe I should make it a small b for DB2, but anyway, anyway, these people are all part of this team, can create and destroy objects and change objects that are defined in an application. Oh, but they're going to take too much storage. We can set some limits on how much storage it is. These are soft limits, so if they if the storage limit gets exceeded, then we'll prevent additional provisioning. We don't, if you want to have a hard cap on storage, you got to implement that through SMS. But we will prevent them from continuing to create additional environments if they blow through the storage. You can do it by team, environment, user, application, right? How do you give developers the convenience to do these things? All right. So application, I define one in advance and take a look at it. Now, I do want to kick off a note. So you have order, customer, part, supplier, nation, region. And the reason, so it does take a little while to do this. So I want to show one of the nice things is this concept that if you're going to modularize your database, say, I don't want them to create 1,000 objects in the schema. You know, this application, it only needs this small set of objects. So how do you handle that? And then the way you do that in source code is you modularize, you know, that what is really this application? It's this set of code. And for database, it's the same thing. It's this small set of tables. But you say, oh, well, you know, this application is dependent on this other application, and we can handle that. So I want to show that. I don't know. I can't remember if it's case sensitive or not. All right. So I'm just going to add parts up in here, right? So I'm going to add parts up application, create an application by itself, which is a little bit overkill, but it's dependent on the TPCD application, which has other tables that are related to this, right? All right. So what this means is, just for the webcast, right? Commit the application. So now, if I'm working on the application that just requires TPCD1, I'm going to create these objects, right? If I'm, wow, that was fast. So if I'm gonna, if you're a developer in TPCD2, the only thing you're allowed to change are these objects, right? The one that I added. If you can be a member of both teams, if you provision TPCD2, we will lay down TPCD1 first, right? And so we have this concept of application dependencies, and you could split this a different way as well. You could have an application of stored procedures that's dependent on another application that's a bunch of database objects. So the person writing your database code, they're allowed to change the stored procedure code, but they're not going to be allowed to change the stored procedure, the underlying table schema. But when we lay down the stored procedure application, we will also lay down the database object. So you kind of build up what the application definition is, and you have it only defined once in your source control. By the way, when we did this, when I clicked that button, it went out to DB2, it ripped the schema, defined an application for it, registered in Git, right? All right. So now let's go, and I created an application earlier. Let's create test 2. Go, right? I'm going to let that run, but now what can we do with this? I'm going to jump into TPCD1 while TPCD2 is getting created. And so now we see, all right, here's all the objects associated with this, with TPCD1, right? I could destroy it, or I can go in and let's manipulate this. Oh, I don't want to do table space. Table spaces are boring. What did I just do? All right, let's do a table. Nation. All right. This is a column, right? And we have a syntax error, right? This is going to be a test. Do I remember syntax here? Not. How about default null? Right. All right. So at this point, we made a stateful change. Oh, I forgot the semicolon. See? Shift left, right? Oh, I still got a syntax error. What do I got? What did I do wrong here? No, char 20. I'm going to copy because I don't know what I did wrong. It's probably in here somewhere. There we go. So I had something hidden in there. All right. Apply object changes. So at this point, and by the way, the text you're seeing, that's from Git. So there's a web UI on top of, under the covers, the schema has been ripped to Git, so you can make edits to it. And so what it's doing now is saying, all right, so what did I do? Deploying these objects. So I did something that affects an index. Did I give the same name? Cancel. Test call. How am I affecting the index? Oh, I see. I don't want to have a drop and recreate. All right, now it's just an alter. So behind the scenes, it takes your DDL, does a compare against your target environments, and the product goes, hey, how do I have to make this change, right? So you get a little assistance on how the change is going to be enabled, and then you say, okay, oh, unload, drop, create, load. No. The DBA is never going to approve that. Joe's not going to allow it. Now, but alter, okay, no problem. I added the column correctly. All right. So this is about, providing an interface that's consumable, providing self-services and allowing people to make changes. And then the next phase of this, let's go back one. So the next is let's upgrade, right? Let's promote this change. And what does that look like? Comment. I added this column, right? And then when we submit the pull request, this submits it. So you see what the change was. Okay, there was a change at the end of this column, and we added a column, and you'd submit the pull request. And this would notify the administrators that there's a change that's been submitted, and they can review and approve it or reject it. You can also go back, and this other environment has been laid down and been created successfully. So what we're trying to show is, how do we provide the opportunity? You don't even have to be doing schema changes. This could be for a COBOL programmer, Java programmer, somebody that writes stored procedures, giving them the ability to create and destroy their own application environment, make changes, modify the data, and then when they're done, clean it all up. So this is showing you through web UI, but you saw earlier, hopefully, it's going to make me shine in my password here. We're going to find out if I, Postman, why are you making me do this? All right. So here we go. X out of this. 99 REST APIs, right? So when you saw earlier that they signed in a web page and caused something to happen, 99 REST APIs to create instances, return instances, interact with the software. This is how we can orchestrate things. And it's really, this is the next generation of software on System Z, right? Make it easily integratable with tools that are on platform, off platform, provide the self-services that people need to have agility. And then the administrator is going to get to review and approve that change, but they don't have to initiate that change to every environment. So we're going to bring what that person needs to them to decide whether that change is good or not. So what I encourage people to do is, when you look at how your shop operates, where can you improve efficiency? Where do developers get stuck? What do they need? What do they need to? When do they have to wait for people? And attack that through automation, and really prioritize things that are rarely done but are very painful, or things that are frequently done, and they just, the micro delays also have a serious impact on productivity when they're done a lot, right? So look at your organization. What do you end up spending time doing that you could offload and automate? And what are people waiting on that could be automated, and just take a pathological approach to that. All right, I'm going to bring back up the slides. Just want to give you a taste of the type of changes that are coming, that are available, and more to come. I mean, this is a key investment area for us, right? How do we bring System Z to the next generation, and make it as efficient as possible? That's all I have. And thank you for your time. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Martin, you got anything else?
I'm just looking. I've got one question here. Oh, he had questions here, and you answered them before I got to them. So I think we're all set question-wise. Let me just check here to make sure. Yeah, Jeff's questions were answered for you. So
excellent. My email is on the screen, and I welcome, we're building for the future. So we really need to hear from our customers, and I hope that if you have any questions that you don't want publicly, then feel free to reach out. And really, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Patrick. That was absolutely excellent. It's good to see what you guys are doing, and it's good to see that you're going to keep DB2Z alive and relevant for the next generation of developers, and that's just fantastic. Now I'm just going to put up our last slides. I also need to ask my final polling question here, which is always one of our most favorite ones, which is, did you learn anything today? And we like to, we often get, well, people are answering quickly. We'll just show the answer to that. And the answer is, everyone that attended today learned something.
If anybody wants to add anything, I want to see something like this, any kind of feedback, we love to hear from people. What do they want to see? Who do they want us to talk to? This is a booming space. So, and our customers shape where we go, right? Absolutely.
And this was really, really great stuff, and it's good for people to see the demo. I'll be noting that in the replay blog. Patrick has made his, you don't really have a lot of slides. This is more of a watch the demo if you want to see what was going on, but it was fantastic, and I'm sure people were very appreciative of what you've done today. Oops, that's my last slide. I'll leave that up. I'm going to cue the music and let people get on with their day. It's lunchtime here on the East Coast, and that's an important meal. Not as important as breakfast. Still a good thing to have. So cue the music. Thank you once again, Patrick, for a great show. We look forward to having you back in the future. And everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you next month for the DB2 Night Show on both LUW and C.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.